Good evening and thank you for being here. It's a very special evening because usually all of us would come here to actually hear Dr. B.N.'s. And here we are, a few of us, remembering him in admiration, in respect, in adoration, for what he has contributed to the world of Indian art, and I'm certainly not competent to speak about that. But whatever little I have experienced and known, he's made such a big difference to the way each one of us looks at art, the way each one of us feels about art, the way each one of us thinks about art. I remember hearing him several years ago and was completely mesmerized because he spoke not just about the painting, but he laced it with poetry. And poetry in Urdu, poetry in Persian, in Hindi of course, Sanskrit, Braj Bhasha. Apparently he spoke a bit of German too, though he didn't quote that when he spoke in Bangalore. But I think what he gave to all of us was such a richness of possibilities, a canvas of imagination, and he always, led you somewhere and then let you make your own decision or your own path. I remember one of my early memories really was that I think it was the Mahu Art Gallery, I don't believe this had organized, I think it was the Varamasa, where Goswamy was speaking and Malavika Sarkar was dancing. And I've never seen two people, more perfectionists than the other. There was Goswamy at the mic, Malavika sitting in the audience saying, Goswamy, move it a little bit here, move it a little bit there. And he would say, is it okay if I stand here? Can I step here? Do the voice check and everything. I mean, it was just amazing how much effort he would put into whatever he was doing. And I consider myself particularly fortunate because the thing that I believe he and I shared a lot was poetry. And he would come home and we would have a whole afternoon of Goswamy reciting mainly. And I would have a list of poems that I would want him to explain to me or to interpret for me. And as he talked about, as he loved to quote Meet That You Need, I think that quote is as applicable to his work, where I think if I can try and remember it, where he talks about and says, "De saans bhi ahista ki nazuk hai bahut kaam." Those of you who heard Goswamy speak would remember this. "De saans bhi ahista ki nazuk hai bahut kaam. Afaq ki is karagaye shisha gahi." I think that was the quality he brought to everything that he did. There was sensitivity, there was imagination, there was perspective, and he made you see things that you had never seen before. And also, I guess, to quote Ghalib, when Ghalib wrote about himself, I think it's so true of Goswamy ji, where Ghalib said, "Hai aur bhi duniya mein sukhandar bahut achhe, kehte hain ki Ghalib ka hai andaz-e bayan aur." It was the same Goswamy and paintings. So what we're going to do this evening is share two films that Matt has actually done as part of a series called Illuminations with Goswamy. We'll start with the first of these films, and then I will do my best to get Abhishek to talk about his long association over 2 decades with Goswamy ji and what that has meant to him, what is the contribution that Goswamy ji has made to MAP, including the films that you will just see. But before I do that, just to say that how in his own life, poetry and portrait and painting was just part of everything else. I was hearing day before yesterday at his remembrance that they did in Chandigarh, his daughter speak. And she shared with the audience the fact that his will starts with a poem in Persian. And I thought to myself, this has to be the only will in the world that has poetry associated with it. And the day before he passed on, this was the 16th, in ICU, to his daughter, he dictated an article that he wrote as a series called Art and Soul. And his daughter says, it was all, he was all there, the comma, the full stop, the new paragraph, all of that he dictated the day before he passed on. So that is the person we are here to remember. So if we can have the first word, please.
Clearly, this is an album page. The convention or the practice of preparing albums was not very old. It comes in the time of Jahangir, Shah Jahan. So there are wonderful albums which were prepared for the Mughal rulers. For a person who really loves these things, whether it is painting or it is calligraphy, it was important to assemble good things together. They may be completely unrelated to each other in point of time, completely. So it's not as if the album is telling a story. The album is telling the story of the taste of the person for whom it was assembled. Murakka is the word which is used. In local language, sometimes it is translated as mukabba or something like that, but murakka is the word which is used for an album. It's interesting that when you see a folio from an album separated from the album and so on, then you can tell whether it is on the left side or the right side, because the borders are uneven. Because if you have a book like this and a similar folio like this and so on, then the makers of albums are very, very clever, very clear in their minds that the width of this particular column, this particular border, would be narrower, because that narrow width will have to be matched by the narrow width of the folio to the right. And so the two of them will make the same width as the one out here. And so these are refinements which one does not always have to go into. Here, there is nothing of the kind. So it looks like a page from an album and may not necessarily be a page from an actual album. So most of the space is taken out by the extremely beautifully done floral details on the borders. Inside, set, like a diamond in the heart of the thing, is a portrait of a young prince. How do we know this is a young prince? Is he as richly dressed as we might expect it? No, there are 2 or 3 indications. He might be the heir apparent, might be the son of the ruler or very close to him, likely to succeed him. Because 2 or 3 cues are placed in our direction by the painter. One is the nimbus behind the head of that circular orb, I call it. We don't call it a halo in the Indian tradition. The halo is a Christian thing which is slightly transverse. The perfectly round thing is called a nimbus, and that is only reserved for either for gods, deities, or for sovereigns. So we get an indication that this person is likely to be going to become a sovereign. The second thing, a detail, what does he hold in his hand? Is sarpesh. Sarpesh is a piece of jewelry which is very expensive and which is symbolic of the power. Only chosen people with very high rank were allowed to have sarpeshes stuck in their turbans like that. And for a ruler to give a sarpesh as a gift to somebody was to be given the greatest honor to the person who is the recipient. How do we date this? There's no name, but dating is not difficult because he's wearing a patka around his waist, at the end of which there are two panels, the patka, and those are floral patterns. And this patka with a floral pattern like this and so on came only with Shah Jahan. It is a Shah Jahani mark, you can say. The face is young, has yet to meet the world at its own terms. There's some innocence in the face, lack of experience, lack of the roughness of the world around yourself. But what surprises me here, and it's unusual, that in his left hand there is a staff, a stick. Not a tall staff, but a staff. Why would this young man need that? Not to walk. I don't think his age is of that particular kind. There is no disability that you can see. Maybe somebody's idea of a sign of walking with authority with this and so on. I don't know. I can't make sense of that. But it's a quiet figure, pleasant to behold.
You've had over a 2-decade association with him, so there's lots that we want to hear from you. Of that, experience, what it meant to
It's
you.
too short.
But yeah, as actually it's funny to say that I was with Malavika when, I was talking to her when we heard about the passing of Goswamy. And she said something. She said, even though he was 90, you felt he was in the prime of his life because he was writing so many books, he was doing so many things. But coming back to the series that you've done now, how did the idea evolve, and what was the whole thought behind doing this, and what was your vision and what was his vision, and how did it happen? I remember when he came for the recordings.
And we all heard him speak, and we know how eloquent he was. But all these are residing with us only as talks that he's done. And it's never, you can tell it was a lecture that we are hearing without him now. And I said, this is not the way the world should be looking at your works. They needed to be where you're speaking about one work at a time. And why don't we do a series? I've been egging him on for a long time to do, there were 10 different projects we were talking about. It was in one of the trips to the Lynchburg that he finally succumbed and he said, okay Abhishek, I give in and let's do a series, because I said I'm going to send a filmmaker to be with you in Chandigarh, and every day you just speak to him about one subject. Let us just record it all, and not for an audience, but just you speaking into the camera. So we didn't know what to do with what kind of series, because we've spoken about the Baramasa, we spoke about the Galinis, we spoke about on color, we spoke about different schools of paintings. And he said, send me the images from the collection and let me make a selection. He selected, I think, 27 or 28 works. And he said, I'd like to see these when I come. So we pulled them out. And he said, let me tell you what I think about these works and why I've selected them. I said, why don't we do this on camera? And that's how the series came.
Wow. So quite, but tell me, what is your one abiding memory that you believe shaped your perspective and the way you look certainly at miniature paintings?
Vinita, I must have been about 17, 18 when I first saw miniature paintings up close. And I could tell what was Kishangarh, what was Bundi, what was Malwa, what was Deccan, what was old, what was new, which was the Raja in it, what was fake, what was genuine. It was all very confusing. And for everything I had to go to a pandit to ask. Whereas if it was looking at a work by Manjeet Baba or Hussain, I could go to them and they could tell me everything about it. Here, who could I go to? So I parked it aside until this guy came and infected me.
How did you first meet him? I mean, where did this, decades-long relationship begin?
So I think I met him at a talk of his, but the first time we really spent time together was when he had done a workshop, which was, I think, a 4 or 5 day workshop as an immersion into miniature paintings. And he would be on his feet, taking us through different schools of paintings every day for like 5-6 hours a day. And I think it was a group of 15 or 18 of us who did that. So he had the ability to make you fall in love with the subject without knowing anything about it. And so he and me became quite unpopular when it came to the contemporary art scene, because that was the time my love affair moved from modern and contemporary painting to miniature painting or traditional Indian painting. And we used to have a laugh on the side, not in front of anyone. I said, people now not just hate me, but they hate you for having done this to me. He said, but aren't you better off?
You certainly are. You think so. So how did he, what was his response to people
I
who...
thought we had a conversation. It's only you asking me questions.
Yeah, because I have so many questions to ask you. You can try and send some questions at some stage. But, he interacted with a lot of people who were art collectors, who would buy art only for resale value and so on. And he was also one of those people who, in his own very nice way, could tell you things without you feeling offended in any way. So, any thoughts on what was his, how did he think about people who collected art, what they did with art? I mean, he was so involved with so many museums, not just in India, but also around the world. And I'm sure this is something that you must have discussed.
He always knew somebody who's a collector and somebody who's a dealer. And he would be a lot more measured in how he would give of himself to them, without making them feel that way. But I think I've seen him interact that way with 1 or 2 people, where he would give them a little bit, but not enough to make them thrilled. But at least they would get something more than what they had come with to start off. He would be very generous with his time, with his knowledge, when it came to anybody, as long as they were just wanting to learn.
Yes.
But if they were wanting to learn with the idea of a resale or something, he wasn't that giving of himself. It could be a young kid who had no interest in collecting, just about learning. He would have all the time in the world.
Actually, he was such a consummate learner himself, which is why, at least I haven't met another art historian, who connects paintings with poetry with a certain time in history. And
so Vinita, he was friends with all the schools of miniature painting. He was friends with Ram Singh of Kota. He was friends with Nansuk. He was friends with every person in every painting. He was friends with Ram. He was friends with Krishna. He was friends with Vishnu. And they were all his contemporaries. The way he would flit in and out of schools, of centuries, of different, from the Vishnu Sahasranam to what was happening in another. I mean, he just knew everything. It was unbelievable. And sometimes I would get not just his opinion, but another person's opinion. And they both did not know that I was consulting the other person. So what little nugget of information I would get from one, I would pass on to the other.
Trying to do
And
this.
oh, इतना पता है, इसे पर तुमको ये पता था क्या? Which of course I didn't know anything. So I would go back to the other person and I said, sir, but did you look at this one? He said, oh God, I never looked at that. So each one used to think I was smarter than I actually was.
Yes, yes. But if you were to think about one or two areas where he made an abiding contribution to the way you look at art, what did he make you see that you had not seen before? And not just in terms of, this image or that image, but deep down, if you were to think about it, because, you've spent your life in art as well. And, obviously, there is a certain depth, there is a certain profoundness that comes with all of that. What was that one or two things that he did for you?
I think he made me look closely. He made me look slowly. And he, like in the little tributes that Krish did for us in the beginning, where he said you have to read a picture from top to bottom, left to right, right to left, and you can't miss a single detail. How everything is actually, the Indian painter 200, 300 years ago was far smarter than we attribute them to be today. And they were amazingly imaginative in how they would communicate it. And it was these little nuances. Of course, I still can't say I can notice anything beyond what he has shown me. But he's at least made me look at them, and once or twice he's made a little comment. He said, "Tum dekhna seekh liyo." So, whenever I would comment on a particular painting, that this is what I saw in that. So once or twice he's made that comment. So maybe that's what he showed me how to do. But you were talking about how he would look at different things. I remember there was a little show we done for a school where we had some of Sebastian Salgado's photographs. And he paused in front of that, and I didn't know about his interest in Salgado's work at all. Of course, Salgado's work is well known to anybody who's interested in photography. And he said, can you have your team pull out all the Salgados in the collection, and I'd like to see them. And then he said, I'd like to write about him. So I said, why don't I connect the two? So have a chat with him. He said, I'd love that. So I actually sent an email and I connected the two of them. And he wrote a piece for Art and Soul in Tribune on Salgado and the works that he saw. So it was not just about Indian traditional painting. It could be about photography, it could be about textile, it could be about architecture. He was just interested in anything visual. Yeah.
In fact, his book Conversations is a great tribute to his expansiveness and the canvas he covers, right from bronze miniatures to
folk and tribal art, to popular culture, everything. In fact, it's funny you bring that up because when that book came out, the 100 excerpts from Tribune, there were many works that he had referred to where we had a parallel in the Nana collection. And I said, it could very well be about the work that we've done here. So we got permission from him and the Tribune to redo them by changing the image and the parts to make it relevant to the ones in our collection. And I think Shilpa will be able to tell me exactly how many there are, but about 18 or 20 that have happened or some are yet to appear. And Ruminations that you saw just one episode from, today is the first day we're showing it.
Wow.
Today is the first day we're showing it, and I think we might launch the entire series on his birthday or on some such occasion which will be more meaningful. There are about 26 or 28 of them.
I mean, what a treasure. What a treasure that is. Coming back to what he said about making you see, he said on more than one occasion that we see very little. And he uses the words, I think we are remarkably visually illiterate. And I think what he did and what he strived for all along was to make us see things that would not this too. And he created a story around all of these.
Tell me about how you connected with B.N.G. because what's amazing is we both are sitting together also because of a B.N.G. connection.
Yes.
It was he who connected me to Malvika, who connected me to you.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I mean, we would have possibly met, but he became the catalyst in this. But how did you first meet him?
That's very true. So I met him through Malvika. So I think.
And I met Malvika through him.
And you met Malvika through him. I mean, he was a great connector. And I remember the first time I met him, we got off like a house on fire because it was not just how he explained painting, but I mean, I was completely taken up by his ability to quote from here and there. And I remember after one of, it wasn't always, a long quote. He would just suddenly give you 2 lines, which made such big difference. And I remember there was a concert that, one of the series that he and Manavika used to do together. And I believe they've done over 20 or 25 such shared evenings, where he would talk about a particular topic and then Manavika would dance it. And at one of those where, she finished dancing, he turns and he says, "Ye to wo yaad aa gayi mujhe wo nights." I said, "Kya, Goswami ji?" He said, "Kisi ne likha tha, now if I can remember correctly, गुनगुनाती हुई गिरती हैं फलक से बूंदें, कोई हाँ, गुनगुनाती हुई गिरती है फलक से बूंदें, कोई बदली तेरी फाजिल से टकराए." I mean, what you don't have to say anything more than that. And
I remember he was telling me about one of Malvika's dances where Hanuman first sees Ram and she's playing the role of Hanuman and how she's twirling her tail and the expressions and the way she's doing it, when you are so smitten and in adoration and you can't get your eyes up, and how you are just nervous and you're doing that. And he said that day I knew that this has never been done in dance or in painting before.
Yeah. And one of the other things they shared was the Richness Museum, where he went every year and she was there oftentimes as well.
So this I think was the first year that he could go.
Yes.
And the first year that I didn't go. And there used to be the Trimurti of Indian painting. B.N. Goswamy, and the talk in the evening was always B.N. Goswamy. And then Eberhard Fischer and Milo Beach. And whatever paintings they would be talking about would actually be passed around the room for you to hold in your lap and see. And I do not even know how I got invited to this group, but this was not something that I would miss for anything. And it would be just 20 people from around the world who were called for this. But what a treat it used to be.
Yeah.
And he said, एक बार तुम अपना म्यूजियम खोलो फिर हम लोग भी वो यहीं पे करेंगे.
True. And I mean, from that to the Calico Museum to textiles to again this book of conversations talks about a lot of those. Interestingly, I picked up and only Goswamy ji could do this, his latest book, which is The Indian Cat. And I know you have the book. I took it from the PDF he had sent to me. And what he's done, if I may just read out. So, at the end of the book, one would think how much is there on the Indian cat. But Goswami ji has found what Ghalib wrote on the Indian cat, what Mir Takini wrote on the Indian cat, what Allama Iqbal wrote on the Indian cat, and then he's translated those into English. But there's one where he says it's by a poet called S. Ganpati. I don't know very much about this poet, but Goswami ji was smitten by a few lines he wrote on the Indian cat. So Ganpati writes, "A cat is a fallen piece of cloud rolled up in wakeful sleep. A mixed metaphor, descending the stairs with a questioning tail." So, I mean, you do this, and then Goswami ji's got, he was also in his own way, quite playful. So he's translated some, long ones. But this is a poem in Hindi. It's an anonymous poem, which Goswamy ji has translated. And the translation in English goes, "What does a cat say? Meow, 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 meow. No, she says, meow, 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 meow." I mean, so from that, there is a long one of which is translated from Gowswamy. I'll just read a few lines, if I may, because it's just so wonderful. So this is translated from Persian. So Goswamy ji was fluent, of course, in Urdu, Sanskrit, Hindi, Rajbhasha, Takri, which he talks about teaching himself, Takri. So this is translated from the Persian, and it goes, "My cat, noble is she and of gentle temper. Like a winged fairy she seems to be when she leaps or when she lands, coyly swaying. Methinks she is some otherworldly being. Even the prints of her paws on the ground are like heavenly buds about to open their petals." And then it goes on to say, "Her curls put to shame the locks of the beauteous. May, I pray, that as long as the sun keeps moving through his path in the heavens above, may my hand keep stroking gently her soft belly and that seductive arch of her back." I mean, who would have thought you could say these things about a cat?
And he did this book for Apu.
He did this book for Apu, his son, who actually passed away in April of this year, which was.
When you said meow and meow, this was another interesting dinner at home. So we have our golden retriever called Corona. And Radhi was shouting Corona, Corona. And Corona ji is his wife.
This is wife.
So he turned around and he said, first he was a little surprised because he thought that Corona ji has come. And then he said, thank heavens, it is Corona and not Karuna. Only now you would never forget that incident.
Exactly. He had such a way with words. But coming back to the book in Conversations, there's one thing where he talks about color. Is there anything that you can sort of shed a light on? He in particular talks about the color yellow. Pitambuli, and how cows were fed mangoes. So,
Mango leaves.
So,
Pregnant cows were fed mango leaves.
so how, anything?
But before I go into the yellow, there's this brilliant poem he had once narrated, which was Radha and Krishna playing Holi. And the entire poem was just on color. And the names of different colors that they were throwing on at each other. And it was amazing that just the poem was so long because the writer wanted to show the names of the colors he knew.
Wow.
And so one day he shows me a particular color and he says, Abhishek, which color is this? So I said, golden orange, saffron. He said, आप एकदम अंग्रेज हो गए. So I said, क्यों? He said, इसको अमरसी बोलते हैं. Now the moment you hear अमरसी, you know exactly what the color is. He said, what is this golden yellow and saffron and this and that and the other? Now, when you learn color like this, you make associations also. And he said, this is how it was done. Then he went on talking about the 7 whites.
The 7 whites.
The 7 shades of white. Now, when somebody says white, I mean, unless you're going to a paint shop, where you say off-white or broken white or
But even that comes
white.
with a
Yeah.
definition of
But
white.
he says, वो अंडे की छिलके वाली सफेदी, वो बच्चे की आँख में जो सफेद होती है उसकी सफेदी, उबलते हुए दूध की सफेदी, वो जो आई एम नॉट श्योर व्हाट बादल ही यूज्ड, पर वो बादल वाली सफेदी, the kinds of whites that he could go into.
Yeah.
So he was amazing, it was that particular shade, and the moment he took the name of that white, you could picture the white, even though till then you hadn't thought about it.
I know, I always picture him as this mind that, behind reading everything is asking all those questions. I mean, the whole thing that he narrated when he talked, I think it was at the NGMA here, with the work that he had done on men's Sukh, and how he went to the pandas of Hardwar to trace where the family connection had come, and then he traced the family to Pune, and then he landed up there.
And he also got the drawing from that book,
Yes,
which they have
traced
in
Madhavu and
Bhagwan Singh of
yes.
Jasrota.
Yeah, of Jasrota, exactly. I think there's an interview, there's a film which
Which
Amit
Amit
Datta has made on that interview. Yeah, I mean, he was, I think somebody
So
called
talking
him
about
a
Amit.
sleuth as well. He wasn't just a historian, but he was also,
absolutely.
he was a detective.
And he would find that. So it reminds me of two things. Amit was also connected to me through B.N, and in fact, the festival starts tomorrow. Amit's done a whole bunch of films for us, which we'll be showing. But he shows me a particular painting, and he says, Abhishek, this painting might be coming out in the market. तो इसको हाथ से निकलने नहीं देना, अगर तुम्हारे पास आए, ठीक है? So I said, कहाँ है? And he told me, Allahabad में. No, where is Allahabad? Where does one go to Allahabad? So this must have been 10-12 years ago. A dealer calls me and he said कि आप contemporary art में तो शौक रखते हैं, पर आप कुछ miniatures देखना चाहेंगे? So दिखाइए. So he said, काफी सारे हैं, तो आप इधर आ जाइए, ठीक है? And he had one puppy, like so many of them, and it was the good, bad, and the ugly all mixed together. So I was putting one by one aside and giving it exactly a second and a half glance. Suddenly, the picture that he told me, "तुम अगर ये आए, इसको निकलने मत देना." It took a little longer, and I moved it to the right, and then I went back to a slightly faster pace. So I moved them aside, and he said, "क्या हुआ ऐसे नहीं, इसमें कोई मतलब नहीं है." He pulls out that one painting. He said, "इसमें भी?" So I said, "आप ये क्यों निकाले?" He said, "इसमें हम थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा ठहर गए थे." I said, "God, I have to improve my own skills."
Absolutely.
So then he's asking me, "पर इसमें आपको क्या अच्छा लगा?" I said, "ये तो इलाहाबाद से है." The guy actually sits down on the floor. He said, "आपसे मैं बहस नहीं कर सकता." He said, "आपको कैसे पता?" I said, "ये तो मेरी देखी हुई है." So it was just that one little nugget that he let slip that it was from Allahabad. I had never been to Allahabad. I didn't know who was the collector, but because I remembered the painting, I managed to get it.
The other thing about him is his memory. I mean, his ability to recall events, dates, apart from the spoken word, etc. Really, I mean, how can you summarize what he meant to so many people, to each one of us? But I think the one thing that he did to everybody universally is he got you to see something different.
Yeah, so, Radhika and we used to have this, and he said, how does one get cured of this disease? So, बीमारी से आप गोली ले लो, आप ठीक हो जाओ. So we were having this conversation, D&G and me, and I said that somebody asked me, how would one ever get cured? So I said, death. So he said, death? What? I said, death of the collector. That's the only way to cure somebody of this disease.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about death. Again, one of the poems that he used to love to quote was Ali Sardar Jafri's poem called Mera Safar, which is a poem on death. And a lot of his talks, I don't know who painted this, but it's the painting of this very old man, who's sort of towards the end of his life. And then there's this green one of his talks, Goswamy saying, you know, I must have seen this 200 times, and every time I see it, I find something new. And he connected it to this poem, not a poem, it's actually a nazm of Ali Sardar Jafri, you know, where I just recall a few lines. You know, it starts with, फिर एक दिन ऐसा आएगा, आंखों के दिए बुझ जाएंगे, हाथों के कमल घुमाएंगे, और बरगे जुबां से दुख सदा की हर तकलीफ जाएगी. And you know, he goes on, and the whole poem of Ali Sardar Jafri, you've heard it, right? You know, goes on to talk about what death means. हर चीज़ बुला दी जाएगी यादों के नसीब खाने से, हर चीज़ उठा ली जाएगी. And then Ali Sardar Jafri says, लेकिन मैं यहाँ फिर आऊँगा, बच्चों के दहन से बोलूँगा, कलियों की जुबान से गाऊँगा. And then it ends with, which were Goswami's favorite lines, मैं एक गुरेज़ा लम्हा हूँ, अय्याम के अफ़सोस पाने में, मैं एक लरज़ता कतरा हूँ, मसरूफ़ शफ़क़ जो रहता है, माजी की सुराही के दिल से, बाज़ी की सुराही के दिल से, मुस्तक़बिल के पैमाने में, मैं जागता हूँ और सोता हूँ और जाग के फिर सो जाता हूँ, सदियों का पुराना खेल हूँ मैं मर के अमर हो जाता हूँ. I think it was such a favorite of his, and I think with that, and respecting everybody's time, I think we should see the second film.
When a tradition is on its way out, when studios are declining, I mean, the way we speak about painting is as if they're kind of a dirge-like thing. We sing. But then suddenly some surprises can come up. This painting, most uncommon, is on the one hand harks back to a very, very old tradition of showing figures belonging to different periods, 300 years later or 300 years earlier and so on. So in a certain sense, time is being played with, so to speak. We don't realize it immediately. But the moment you start analyzing the coming together of disparate people raised in different periods of time, in different cultural milieus and so on, then we realize that the painter is doing this in order to catch the collective auspiciousness. And these are superb, some extraordinary paintings of that kind, Mughal painting particularly, have been made. I mean, there are very well-known, established, and beautiful paintings where 7 or 8 generations of the same family are people sitting together. And there is a kind of pride in ancestry which is being emphasized, also legitimacy. There is a great deal of killing, there is conspiracies and so on. We are aware of that. But at that moment, when we are seeing these particular paintings, it is as if everything is fine. There is Amir Timur, the founder of the dynasty, and his son is so-and-so, his son is so-and-so, his son is so-and-so. You know, Umar Shaikh Mirza, the father of Babur, is brought in, and then his father, I don't remember the name, and so 3 generations have passed between Amir Timur and Babur, and then of course comes Humayun, then Akbar, and then Jahangir, and then Shah Jahan, and then Aurangzeb, and so on, sitting like this. Rulers got themselves painted, for instance, the great Shahnama, Padshahnama, I'm sorry. We have a double page. Amir Timur, the founder of the dynasty, is on the left side, and Shah Jahan is on the right side, facing each other. Something like 400 to 500 years separates them. And in his hand, in the hand of Amir Timur, is a crown. And his hand is extended, the crown is held like this, as if he's about to pass it on to Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan did not succeed peacefully, had to kill a number of princes and princes' children to make sure that his rule will be now the rule of the Mughal dynasty. So like that. So it's a story which is soaked in blood. Not the Sufi ones. I mean, I'm talking about the genealogical painting, so to speak, where time is vacuumed out and you have generations of people sitting there together. Auspiciousness of their presence is evoked or invoked in this particular painting. It's a synoptic view of the figures who are, in a certain sense, part of the cultural history of India. What the motivation for a painting like this was or is, I do not know. I do not know the painter, though I have met him at a conference in Kasauli not too long ago. I didn't remember his name. I had to find out later. And this painting has an incredible number of figures. Figures that are part of our imagination of India, the idea of India, but come from different regions, as I've mentioned, come from different periods of time. And they're sitting cheek by jowl next to each other, not as if they are in different compartments. There's no grid pattern in here. It's all as if there is a great big mela, a kind of fairground in which they have all accidentally met, or something is happening. And what is surprising in this particular painting, apart from the large crowd of people, right, left, center, and so on, is that it is all under a canopy, a big thing which is spread over, supported by columns, like in a wedding, for instance, and so on. And there are two areas where some fire has been lit, as if a great big yajna is being observed. What yajna it is, nobody knows. Was there an intention behind suggesting that this is a kind of a occasion or a congregation that should be celebrated? We don't know. If you start looking at them, and these people, one knows names by heart, sometimes faces by memory. Guru Nanak next to some Ramakrishna Paramahans. Kabir next to Sant Tukaram. Contemporary poets, Sumitra Nandan Pant, Nirala, and the names are written in very, very fine hand in Persian characters and almost penciled there. A person like the great Sufi Bulle Shah, for instance, would be there. Other people, some of them are paying attention to what is going on there, others have no interest in that, and they're talking to each other. And Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs are all commingling together. It's an idealized version to be cherished, but not real, of peace and interest in culture, in tradition, in values that define India, so to speak, or used to, of one particular kind. The portraiture is very, very attractive. I mean, you can immediately recognize, for instance, some things, some faces, but there are others. I mean, suddenly in the midst of Islamic crowd, Chaitanya breaks into a dance, for instance, singing the praises of Vishnu. The writer of the famous Heer, Waris Shah, is talking to somebody else and so on, as if they were contemporaries and old friends who met after a long time. But very skilled, very, very skilled. And it's almost believable if these names were not there and if you did not recognize Kabir or Tukaram and so on and so forth, then you would think maybe a kind of a mela at which people are celebrating, meeting and so on. I'm very fond of this painting. And I'm happy it is here. And I can lose myself in trying to identify these figures. Some of them are not very peaceful people, but here they are at peace. A political figure like Master Tara Singh, for instance, who was a stormy petrel of the Punjab politics, is here. What he's doing, we don't know. What is interesting is that there are very few women in this painting. And if they are there, there is Mirabai, of course. I think one of them is Sahajobai. They are there, but they are, in a certain sense, at least those who are visiting this particular place, this event or so-called event, are at a certain distance. There's one sitting inside a palace. You can see her through a jharoka house playing on a musical instrument. What is going on? The painter could have fathomed. I and you cannot. Except to look at it with great, deep interest.